It was a humid afternoon in Tupelo, Mississippi, mid-1960s. Elvis had slipped into a corner candy store, baseball cap low. Near the counter, a boy's voice carried soft, raspy, telling the clerk about one thing he wished he could have. Elvis stopped mid-stride. He'd heard enough. If you love true stories where a single act changes everything, stick with me. What Elvis did next would make headlines in his hometown and bring an entire street to a standstill the very next day. The bell above the candy store door let out a sharp tink, the kind you could hear from the back room. Outside, the Mississippi heat pressed down like a wet blanket. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of sugar and old wood. Elvis Presley pushed the door shut behind him, the glass rattling. Ball cap low, aviator shades in place. He moved like any other man just looking to cool off. But this was Tupelo, his town, and, no matter the disguise, people knew. A few heads turned. He gave a polite nod, then drifted toward the old Coca-Cola cooler. That's when he heard it. A small voice near the counter, not loud, just enough to carry over the hum of the ceiling fan. Elvis glanced sideways. An 8-year-old boy stood on tiptoe, freckled cheeks flushed from the walk, his patched overalls faded almost to white. One hand gripped a paper bag of penny candy. The other clutched a few coins, held out toward the woman behind the counter. The faint hiss of an oxygen line trailed from his shoulder to the small tank at his side. The clerk leaned over, kind but firm. "That's not enough, son." The boy looked down, shook his head. "It's not for candy," he said softly. "I just wish I had a real guitar." Elvis froze. A flash of memory hit him bare feet on a creaky porch. His mama's voice calling from the kitchen. The rough feel of that first guitar she'd scraped together $7.75 to buy. He set the Coke back into the cooler, letting the lid thud shut. The boy thanked the clerk, slid his coins back into his pocket, and shuffled toward the door. The bell jingled again, sunlight cutting across the dusty floorboards as it swung open. Elvis pretended to browse a row of candy jars, eyes tracking the boy all the way to the street. The boy turned the corner. "Gone." Elvis stepped to the counter, paid for the Coke he no longer wanted, and walked out. The air outside was hotter, heavier. He tipped his cap lower, crossed the sidewalk, and slid into his car. He didn't start the engine right away. He just sat there, one hand on the wheel, the other drumming against his thigh, eyes locked on the empty stretch of street where the boy had stood. Some moments stick to you. This one wasn't letting go. With a sudden breath, Elvis twisted the key. The Cadillac's engine roared to life, and without taking a sip of that Coke, he pulled into traffic headed somewhere with purpose. The storm rolled in before midnight, bringing with it the kind of rain that made the streets look like rivers. Inside Graceland, the lamps cast warm pools of light against the dark, while the television flickered in the corner. Low and ignored, Elvis sat on the edge of the sofa, one elbow resting on his knee, a half-empty glass of sweet tea on the table beside him. His mind wasn't on the late-night movie. It was on that boy in Tupelo, on the way he'd clutched those coins like they were all he had. Lightning flashed, and the window panes rattled in the wind. Elvis stood, restless. He paced the room, the soft thud of his boots on the rug matching the rhythm of the rain on the roof. He could still see the boy's eyes, could still hear the quiet, certain way he'd said, "I just wish I had a real guitar." It pulled him backward in time to Tupelo hardware store, the smell of oiled wood, and the counter where Gladys Presley had once stood counting out dollar bills and loose change to buy him his first guitar. $7.75. That guitar had changed his life. Now he knew exactly what he was going to do. From the den, he called out, "Jerry, come here a second." His cousin appeared, curious. "We're going to the hardware store." "First thing in the morning," Elvis said. "And I'm gonna need your help finding that boy." Jerry raised an eyebrow. "Want me to call the paper?" Elvis shook his head. "No, this stays quiet. No pictures, no headlines. Just between us." He crossed the room to the corner where a row of guitars stood on stands. Cherry sunburst, jet black, natural wood. He picked up an empty case, opened it, and looked at the velvet lining. Perfect. The rain hammered harder against the windows. Elvis reached for a pen and a piece of Graceland stationery. He paused, tapping the pen against his chin, then began to write in his looping hand. Short, simple words the boy could carry for life. When he finished, he folded the note, slipped it into the case's side pocket, and closed the latches with a solid click. Thunder rolled over Memphis like a drumbeat. Elvis set the case by the door. He turned back to Jerry, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "Tomorrow, we're gonna make somebody's wish come true." Outside, the storm raged on. But Elvis's mind was already in Tupelo, seeing that boy again, seeing the look on his face when he opened the case. What he didn't know yet was that the delivery wouldn't go exactly as planned. The morning sun hit Tupelo hard, already burning off the last of the night's rain. Heat shimmered above the blacktop as a cream-colored 1955 Cadillac eased down Main Street, its chrome flashing in the light. Behind the wheel was one of Elvis's most trusted friends, hand resting casually on the steering wheel, eyes scanning every porch, every yard. He had one mission: find the boy with the oxygen tank. The Cadillac rolled past the diner, the post office, the hardware store. At each stop, the man leaned in to ask, "Seen a boy about 8, freckles, carries a little oxygen tank?" Some shook their heads. Others thought for a moment before pointing further down the road. At the barber shop, the striped pole spun lazily. The barber's sleeves rolled. Comb in hand stepped to the doorway and squinted toward the car. "Yeah," he said. "That sounds like Mary Ellen's kid. Lives 2 streets over. Little white house with laundry on the line." The Cadillac turned off Main, tires crunching on the gravel shoulder. The houses here were smaller, paint peeling. In places, front yards marked by chain-link fences. Halfway down the block, there it was, a single-story white house, a narrow porch sagging at the edges, and a clothesline stretching across the yard with shirts swaying in the breeze. The man parked and stepped out, the slam of the car door breaking the morning quiet. A woman answered the knock, hand shading her eyes. Her face shifted from caution to surprise when she saw the Cadillac idling by the curb. "I'm looking for your son," the man said gently. He explained about the candy store, about someone who'd heard his wish. She pressed a hand to her chest, eyes glistening. "He'll be home after school," she said softly, from the car's trunk. The man lifted a brand new guitar in its case-deep brown wood, brass tuning pegs gleaming. He carried it to the porch, setting it carefully just inside the door. "We'll make sure he's at the candy store this afternoon," she promised. Back in the driver's seat, the man pulled away slowly, glancing once in the rearview mirror at the woman still standing there, one hand resting on the guitar case like it was already a part of the family. He made one last stop, the candy store. The same bell jingled overhead as he stepped in. The clerk looked up and he leaned across the counter. "When he comes in today, keep him here. Give him a soda float, whatever it takes. Just make sure he doesn't leave before we get back." The clerk smiled knowingly. "I can do that." The plan was in motion. The guitar was ready. But no one could be certain the boy would believe what was about to happen, nor that he'd even accept it. The candy store was busier than usual that afternoon. The bell over the door kept jingling, letting in bursts of August heat and the smell of asphalt baking in the sun. Kids pressed their noses to jars of taffy. Mothers chatted near the soda fountain. The clerk glanced toward the door every few seconds. Then it happened, the faint hiss of an oxygen line, followed by the slow, careful steps of a small boy. He stepped inside, cheeks flushed, coins in his palm. The patched overalls were the same as yesterday. "Afternoon," the clerk said brightly. "How about a soda float today?" "On the house." The boy hesitated, surprised. "Really? Sure thing. Have a seat." As the clerk busied himself, the sound of tires crunching on gravel cut through the chatter. A cream Cadillac had pulled up outside, sunlight bouncing off its chrome. Inside, Elvis sat motionless, cap low, just visible through the windshield. Passenger door opened. Elvis's friend stepped out, lifting a black guitar case from the back seat. The weight of it seemed to draw every eye in the store as he crossed the threshold. He stopped beside the counter, resting the case gently on top. "This," he said quietly, looking straight at the boy, "is for you, from a friend who once wished for the same thing." The boy stared at the case, then at the man. His small hands hovered above the latches, as if afraid they might disappear. Finally, he clicked them open. The lid lifted. Sunlight from the front window poured over the polished woodridge. Honey brown, with brass tuning pegs that gleamed like coins. A faint scent of fresh lacquer rose from the velvet lining. The boy's breath caught. He reached out, fingertips brushing the strings, the soft metallic ring of a single note filling the room. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone near the soda fountain whispered, "It's from him, isn't it?" The boy swallowed hard. "Thank you," he whispered, voice almost lost in the hush. Before he could ask the question everyone wanted answered, the friend nodded toward the door. The boy grabbed the guitar, still in its case, and stepped outside, squinting in the bright light. The Cadillac was already rolling away, its taillights blinking once before disappearing round the corner. He stood there on the sidewalk, clutching the case to his chest, as the crowd inside the store pressed to the windows, watching the moment unfold. What the boy didn't know was that the gift came with something more, something hidden in the case that would soon make the whole town certain of the giver's identity. By nightfall, the story had already begun to travel faster than the summer storm rolling in from the west. Neighbors called neighbors. Some said they'd been in the candy store when it happened. Others swore they'd seen the Cadillac parked out front. Nobody could agree on every detail, but one thing was certain: the boy had a brand new guitar. The next morning, the Tupelo Daily Journal ran it on page 2. Local boy gets guitar from anonymous donor, not so anonymous. The article described a well-dressed man in a Cadillac and hinted at a certain hometown hero known for his generosity. Inside the diner, the smell of frying bacon mingled with the low hum of gossip. Farmers on their second cup of coffee leaned across booths. "It was him," one insisted. "I saw that cap. I know that profile." Across town, the boy sat on his front porch, the guitar balanced on his lap. His small hands worked the strings, not yet forming chords, just letting each note ring into the sticky morning air. The guitar looked almost too big for him, its polished wood catching the sunlight in flashes. Passing cars slowed. Drivers honked and waved. A couple of kids stopped at the gate, listening. The boy's mother sat in a rocking chair nearby, her eyes never leaving her son. By noon, a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. Some clapped along to his tentative picking. Others just stood, smiling quietly in the shade of a nearby oak. Two older men debated how the boy came to have it. "Anonymous, my foot," one chuckled. "Mary Ellen knows who it was. She's just not saying." The boy's mother finally stood, walking into the house. When she returned, she carried the empty guitar case, setting it down beside her son. She opened the lid and reached into the side pocket. Her fingers brushed against, folded paper. She froze. The crowd leaned in instinctively, though they couldn't see what she'd found. She pulled it free, her eyes scanning the first few words. Then she looked at her son, lips pressed tight, and slipped it back inside without a word. The boy kept playing, unaware. The case sat open beside him, the slip of paper tucked deep inside. Whatever was written there, she knew it wasn't just a thank you. And soon it would leave. The house was quiet that evening, the cicadas humming outside, the porch now empty. The boy's mother waited until her son was asleep before taking the guitar case into the kitchen. She set it on the table, opened the lid, and reached for the slip of folded paper tucked into the side pocket. It was written on heavy cream stationery, the kind with Graceland embossed in blue at the top, in looping, unmistakable handwriting. "Every dream starts with a first chord. You'll always have a seat in the front row." EP. She read it twice, her breath catching. Then she pressed the paper to her chest and closed her eyes. The next morning, she called the number printed in small type at the bottom of the note. A voice on the other end confirmed it to front row tickets to Elvis's upcoming Memphis show. Would be waiting for them at will call. 3 days later, the boy and his mother stepped into the Memphis concert hall. The air inside buzzed with the sound of thousands of voices, the scent of popcorn and perfume mingling under the heat of the spotlights. Ushers guided them down the aisle, closer and closer to the stage, until they reached 2 seats so near they could see the sheen of sweat on the microphone stand. When the lights dimmed, the crowd erupted. The band struck the opening chords, the bass vibrating in their chests. Halfway through "Love Me Tender," Elvis stopped singing. He lifted his hand, and the room fell to a hush. He stepped to the edge of the stage, scanning the front row until his eyes locked on the boy. With a small nod, Elvis tipped his guitar toward him in salute. The boy's face lit up. The crowd roared, and Elvis went right back into the song without another word. By the final note, the boy was on his feet, clapping as hard as his small hands could. Weeks later, neighbors gathered on that same porch into below. The boy sat with the guitar across his lap, stronger now, his fingers moving more confidently over the strings. He played "Love Me Tender" from start to finish, and the crowd clapped along, their applause rolling down the street. Some swore they could hear just a hint of the king in his voice. That summer day had started with a wish in a candy store, but for the boy, it would never really end. If this moved you, share it with someone who believes one quiet act of kindness can change a life. What's one small act of kindness you've witnessed that still gives you goosebumps?